Ring, ring, ring! Hello?
Hey cuz, can you teach me about econ?
Yeah, sure, I'll teach you about econ. So the study of economics is divided into macroeconomics and microeconomics.
Macroeconomics can be compared to a forest, whereas microeconomics can be compared to a tree. The economy is comprised of the factor market and the product market.
Product markets are concerned with the outputs of a firm. Factor markets are concerned with the input of a firm.
Today we will be learning about factor markets.
Four factors of production: land, which are resources from nature; capital, or manufactured goods used to make other goods and services; entrepreneurship, which means taking risks to create and organize new businesses, products, and innovations; labor, which is all human efforts used in the production of goods and services.
First, we will focus on labor as a resource in the factor market. The labor market deals with determining the price of labor or the wage rate. There are different kinds of firms in factor markets: perfect competition and monopsonies. But before we can discuss these markets and their graphs, we will provide explanations of some terms needed to understand them.
MRP equals MRC, better known as the golden rule. At the quantity where MRP equals MRC, the firm will maximize its profits. The firm will hire labor up to and including this point, but once the MRC becomes greater than the MRP, it is no longer beneficial for the firm to produce at that quantity. The concept of derived demand explains how the demand in the product market greatly affects the demand in the factor or labor market. Let's look at an example. Company X produces tomatoes. Currently, they are producing tomatoes using 40 workers. Company Y produces potatoes. When a blight overcomes the potatoes and their supply decreases, the demand for tomatoes will increase because they are substitute goods. Since the demand for tomatoes increases, the demand for tomato workers will also increase due to the derived demand.
A perfect competition market is one in which all the buyers and sellers within the market are so small that no one firm can affect the market rate. The best way to describe how individual firms behave in perfect competition is to draw two graphs side by side. On the left-hand side, a total market graph should be drawn to indicate the total economy's response to wages and labor. The right-hand graph will describe the individual firm's reaction to conditions set by the entire economy. The first graph, which describes the activity in the labor market in this case, features an increasing supply curve that intersects a decreasing demand curve at the market equilibrium point of W, the equilibrium wage, and QM, the equilibrium quantity. Now we dot across from the industry's equilibrium point to make a horizontal supply curve for the graph on the right, which describes the activity of the individual firm. Because firms in perfect competition are price takers, they are forced to find labor based on the wage set by the entire market. At this graph's profit maximizing point, which is when MRC equals MRP, the microeconomic version of supply equals demand, the equilibrium wage is still W, or the equilibrium wage found in the left-hand graph, and the equilibrium quantity is QF. In addition, the demand curve for a resource is downward sloping because the marginal physical product, MPP, of additional inputs of a resource will decrease as a result of the law of diminishing marginal returns.
A monopsonistic labor market is one in which there is only one buyer of labor in the resource market. Thus, the firm has the ability to set its own price to attract the optimal amount of workers. A monopsony graph has different curves than a perfect competition market graph. MRC diverges from the supply curve. This is because in a monopsony, the same wage is paid to all workers, so an increase in the quantity of labor means an increase in the wage of all already hired workers. In other words, the MRC does not equal the wage rate. In a monopsony, the quantity of labor to maximize profit will still be determined by the intersection of the MRC equals MRP. However, unlike in a perfect competition market, the price will be determined by the supply curve at that quantity.
Land is the most common factor of production that is involved with economic rent. Economic rent is a payment made to a supplier of a factor of production that is greater than the minimum amount necessary to keep that resource employed at that quantity. This is often due to scarcity of the resource. For the economic rent graph, supply is inelastic, so it is a vertical line. This means that regardless of the price or rent, the quantity will remain the same. The equilibrium rent and quantity of land is where demand equals supply. One example of why the demand for land may shift right is due to change in related goods. For example, the land in the next plot over is a substitute good. This means that if the price for it goes up, then the demand for the original land will increase. On the contrary, property taxes is a complementary good. If the price of the taxes decreases, then the demand for the land will increase.
In the long run, a firm may be able to change both its labor and capital. The cost-minimizing combination of these two resources for a given firm can be found with the equation MPP of labor divided by the price of labor is equal to the MPP of capital divided by the price of capital.
The profit-maximizing combination of these two resources for a given firm can be found with the equation MRP of labor over MRC of labor equals MRP of capital over MRC of capital equals 1.
Okay, bye.
Okay, squat, and then squat.
You're telling us to squat? Ready, guys? Ring, ring, ring.
Oh, what? Yeah, sure, I'll teach you about econ. So, the study of economics is divided into macroeconomics and microeconomics.
The concept of macroeconomics can be compared to a forest, whereas microeconomics can be compared to a tree.
Hit me with your best shot. Why don't you hit me with your